Thank you for joining us for a Marketing Sherpa webinar sponsored by TRUSTe. In the next hour we have together, we want to talk about testing. We want to talk about what happens when you get a negative result on a test. It's never fun, but you can learn from it. And so in the next 60 minutes, we're going to go through some case studies and some tests that we've conducted right here in our own labs. But we're not only going to talk about those specific tests, we're going to talk about how we did them. And my hope is that in the next hour, we can show you how to get more out of the tests you're already running, more knowledge and hopefully better results. So to help us do that, you can interact with us live using the hashtag Sherpa webinar on Twitter. You can also use your snazzy ReadyTalk platform. There's a way to ask questions on there. We're going to try to answer as many questions as possible, but also using hashtag Sherpa webinar on Twitter, we'd like to hear your advice as well. We've got hundreds of marketers on the line, hundreds of experienced marketers, and you can definitely learn from each other, and we can learn from you as well. So let's talk about who you're going to hear from today. My name is Daniel Burstein. I am the Director of Editorial Content at MechLabs. And that means I oversee all the editorial content for MarketingSherpa.com as well as MarketingExperiments.com. With me today is Paul Cheney, a Junior Editorial Analyst at MechLabs. He focuses on writing about testing and optimization research. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Yep, thank you, Dan.
We also have in the office John and Justin. They are marketing wizards as well. They're going to keep their mouths shut today because they're scared of talking. They're going to be monitoring the Q&A on ReadyTalk and hashtag Sherpa webinar. So please ask them some very difficult questions. Let's see what they can answer. Coming out of Denver, we have Anthony and Susan from ReadyTalk to make sure you have a good experience with this webinar. And from the windy city of San Francisco, we're pleased to join Tina Howe, Director of Product Marketing at TRUSTe. Tina, could you tell us for a moment a little bit about TRUSTe and what questions you can help answer on this webinar for our audience of marketers?
Sure. Thanks for having me join you on this webcast. Like you mentioned, I'll take a couple of seconds to talk about what we're all about. So the seal that you see here on the screen is the one that the majority of you will probably recognize as being a broadly accepted indicator of online privacy. Now you might wonder, why is a privacy solutions provider here on this webcast? Well, with privacy being one of the biggest concerns that's keeping consumers from transacting online, it is very much a player when you think about increasing conversions. So despite our roots in driving online privacy standards and certifications with the privacy officers of the world, we found that the result of our work is our ability to increase peace of mind with consumers, and the result of that is increased conversion rates and customer engagement. So we've been doing this for over 14 years with over 4,500 customers, ranging from the very small Sohos up to your Fortune 500. The website privacy product that most of you are probably familiar with is where you'll see the seal in most instances. But since then, we've also introduced products for online behavioral advertising, SaaS and cloud platforms, as well as mobile applications, to name a few. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass that back to you, Dan.
All right, thank you, Tina. Let's come back to our Jacksonville Beach, Florida headquarters, tell you very briefly about our organization so you can understand what you're about to see. On the left, you'll see Marketing Experiments and Marketing Sherpa. Those are probably the brands that you are familiar with. Those are the brands where you can read how-tos and case studies and benchmark reports and research to help you do your job better, to get better marketing results. But on the right there, Applied Research. We also have our own labs where we do our own hands-on testing and optimization research with Fortune 500 companies, with small companies, and that is one of the case studies you're going to hear about today. So I'm going to turn you over to Paul Cheney to talk about a homepage test we ran, and then stay tuned after that. We're not going to just talk about these tests again. We're not going to just talk about what we did with these tests. We're going to talk about how we did it to help you improve your own testing. So Paul, tell us about this first test.
Sure, Dan. So this test is a Reg Online homepage test. Reg Online is an event management software solution. They let their users manage events online from everything from registering to managing the actual event and ticket sales. The goal in this case, we were trying to capture leads on the homepage, and so the goal was to increase that number of leads. And our primary research question was, which page will achieve the greatest addressable lead rate? And our approach was a A/B multi-factor split test. So before I get to the control, you should know that this case study had prior testing. This control had prior testing. Reg Online had tested before. They tested themselves into this page. So they'd actually learned a lot already, and we weren't starting from scratch here. We were starting with a fairly optimized page. But with that, we still saw a few things wrong. One of those is there wasn't much conversation going on. This is the control you're looking at, by the way. It just starts right off with a picture of testimonials. And then on the right there, you can see a lead form. There's a lot of forms to fill out, form fields to fill out right there. And then down below, we've got some screenshots of the actual product with little to no introduction or reason why they're there. So this was a two-step process. There was, again, on the second step, we found there wasn't much supporting value. We always want to keep adding the value all the way through the process. We found that usually increases conversion. So we saw there wasn't too much supporting value, and the button was a pretty normal button design. There's not much attention drawn to it. It's easy to miss. So that was the control, and here's the treatment. We hypothesized that if we clarified the value proposition to emphasize free access over something like talking more about the product itself, we would get a lift. Also, we reduced the number of form fields in the first step. We actually turned this into a three-step process. We didn't reduce the total amount of form fields by much, or really we didn't add to the form fields even though there was 3 steps. We reduced the form fields on that first step to gather more partial leads that could then be remarketed to if they decided not to complete the process. And we reduced the overall friction of the page, or so we thought, by matching the flow of the page from starting with a conversation and ending with that call to action. So we matched it to the thought sequence of the visitor. Here's step 2. Again, we supported the value on the page over there on the right, and we punched up the design of the button a little bit.
Let me stop you right there for a minute, Paul, because these changes that Paul's talking about making, when you see the results, I want you to understand that our research analysts run thousands of tests. And through those tests, they found that these types of changes produce significant results. So, for example, when he talks about supporting value to maintain cognitive momentum, what that means is we see many processes where the marketers only deliver value at first, the landing page. And then as the audience is forced to walk through this process, all the value is gone. And there's much drop-off. So our managing director, Flint McLaughlin, likes to explain it this way. If you're going fishing, okay, we're in Jacksonville Beach, Florida here. The beach is just a few blocks away. If you're going fishing, you toss your line into the water, okay? You hook your fish, and you start reeling it in. But you keep that line tight. You don't let any slack get on the line, or that fish is going to spit out the hook, and it's the same exact thing with your processes, right? So if you don't keep showing the customer the value of why they should be completing the process, they're likely to drop off. And that is just one example of the optimization changes you're seeing in here that, again, we've seen work in hundreds and hundreds of tests. So go on, Paul.
Yeah, that's right. So here's step 3. Again, the only thing we did here was we really called out that call to action button with a better design, and we actually eliminated one of the form fields, which is the confirm password field. So again, even though there's 3 steps, we actually eliminated one of the fields. So sorry, I'm trying to get to the next slide. Oh. Here's the side-by-side, the control and the treatment.
Well, what I wanted to set it up by saying on this slide, hopefully people aren't that quick and didn't see the results, is keep in mind this was an already optimized page. Active Networks Reg Online, they were pretty good optimizers. They were pretty good testers. And so our colleagues over there that are doing research in the labs all the time, sometimes they get some low-hanging fruit and they produce amazing results. So I wanted to see how big of a lift. Could they get a triple-digit lift off of an already optimized page? Could they get a triple-digit lift, Paul? Let's see. What did they do?
Well, let's find out, Dan. And no.
Oh.
The answer is no. we got a 24.5% decrease in conversion. So in spite of all those best practices that we were trying to apply, in spite of all those tactics that we tried to apply, we still got a loss. And so if you're in, I feel like a lot of marketers struggle with this. They apply these best practices. They apply all these tactics that they know that marketing gurus say are going to work, and then they test it, and it doesn't work. So what do you do? What do you do in that situation? And that's what we're going to try to answer for you today. But I can tell you one of the things that we did. Well, go ahead.
Well, before we jump in, we got a great question on Twitter, and it's from Matoken, I think. The Twitter IDs are great. They're hard to read. And he wants to know, how do you test an entire site redesign? And that's perfect, because after we get through the next case study where we're going to show you the next test we ran, essentially what we're going to be talking about is going to help you test everything from an entire site redesign to a landing page to every offer you produce, because what we're going to show you is how to learn more about your customer. And that's where all marketing begins. So Matoken, I think it is, stay tuned. I want to turn it back over to Paul for this next test. Did we let them test anything else, or did we just pull the plug?
No, we didn't pull the plug. But what we did do was we didn't do any further testing on that homepage. We got a loss on the homepage, and even though it was only 50% of the traffic, and even though it was only for a short testing period, it was still hurting the revenue. So we didn't want to take the risk of testing any more on the homepage. So what we did, and if you find yourself in this situation, what you can do is move to a different channel with similar motivations and similar, sort of a similar setup. So what we did was we moved to a channel that was an SEO channel. This was an SEO landing page that we were testing. So most of the traffic was coming to this landing page from organic search and non-branded keywords. Again, we're trying to capture leads. We're trying to increase the amount of leads. It's the same sort of process. And our research question is, which online capture process will generate the highest addressable lead rate? And addressable there means totally completed forms. So these leads are actually completing the entire form, not just parts of the form. That was our primary goal. And so here's the control. You can see it's optimized for SEO, not necessarily for humans. The headline up there, industry-leading online registration forms, that's obviously just a keyword. There's not too much value in the text, although it is text-based. So there is more of a conversation than, say, the homepage was. Again, there's a lot of form fields right up front. And one of the things we noticed in our first test was that people were clicking on the pricing tab up there. Let me see if I can get my markup tool here. So up here, they were clicking right here on this pricing tab. And sorry, I'm new to ReadyTalk, so I'm a little shaky on the platform. But so they were clicking on the pricing tab. They were looking at the price before they were getting to the value. So what we decided we would do, and again, this was before I tell you that, this was we turned it into a 3-step process, but this was a 2-step process in the control. Not a lot of value on the right. Again, the button is fairly bland. So here's the treatment. What we did was we eliminated that navigation. So what we were trying to do was direct the visitors through the value before they saw the price.
Yeah, this is a very important point, Paul. This is something we call unsupervised thinking. You do not want your audience to have any unsupervised thinking. You want to lead them through the funnel exactly as you think they should go through the funnel, exactly as you have tested and optimized and found out the best way to send customers through the funnel. So we're talking about price here. Of course, we want the customers to see the price. We just want them to see it at the appropriate time in the buying process. Let me give you an example. Paul, if I'd say, I will sell you a car for $50,000, does that sound like a good deal?
No, it doesn't. It depends on the car.
Exactly. No one wants to buy a generic car for $50,000. Now, if I told you I was going to sell you a brand new Bentley with leather seats and a little champagne cooler in the back seat for $50,000, how does that sound to you?
That sounds like you're breaking the law, but it sounds like sounds pretty good. I would probably scrounge around and save up $50,000 to buy that, and then resell it. But yeah.
And that's exactly our point here. They need to understand the value. For this product, this is not true for every product. You need to test to understand what is the right funnel for your customers and how you want to send them through that funnel. But for this product, they needed to understand the value before they understood the price. And so when we talk about taking that navigation off, it was to guide their thinking. So there was no unsupervised thinking. They didn't just click around on their own. So sorry, Paul, go on. I can't wait to see the results for this one.
Yeah.
If it's a 10% loss, we're doing better, you realize.
Yep, I do realize that, yes. And hopefully we won't click and ruin it. So we've got no navigation. We're directing them through the value first. We've reduced the amount of form fields again. And this time we're focusing not so much on the step level. I think I forgot to mention this in the homepage test, but on the homepage test, we tried to focus on the step level of getting the free access rather than just the value of the product itself. We found that a lot of people were coming to the page from branded keywords, so we thought maybe they were seeing, maybe they already knew about the product and they were just interested in getting free access. So one of the things we hypothesized and tried to test on this one was whether or not the value of the product itself was a higher motivator. So again, on the right, we've got value of the product. We reduced the number of form fields. We've got value all the way through the process. Here's the third step. And here's the side-by-side. Again, the control and the treatment. And here's the results. 548% increase in completed leads. And that's just completed leads. So we actually, and that's the smaller of the two numbers, we actually got a 1,312% increase in partial leads that we could then remarket to hopefully expand on our lead base that we wouldn't have even gotten if we had just asked them for all those fields right up front.
Now that's an excellent point, Paul, because we got a question here from Linda. And she says, so you recommend 2 screen forms over forms that you complete on 1 screen. And here's the test we recommend, Linda. Okay, as Paul said, we got a 1,312% increase on partial leads. So if you have a 2-step process, and in that first process you just get what you absolutely need to be able to remarket to them later, you can increase your overall amount of leads. Right? So think about it. You have 1 form, you ask for everything up front. I think everyone on the line knows the more fields in a form, the more required fields, the more likely people are to bounce and not fill it out. However, if you ask for just that vital information you need right up front, then you can remarket. Then you can get more leads from the people who only wanted to fill out a little bit of info up front. So before we go more into our learnings, there's something here. I want to go back for a second to this test, Paul, because there's something I want to ask Tina about. I noticed here in this process, I noticed that beautiful trustee seal along the bottom. How do I? Here we go. Okay. I can do it better than you can, Paul.
Oh, yeah, you can.
I noticed that RateTalk is very easy to use. I noticed that beautiful trustee process. And so I wanted to ask Tina, because I know through a lot of our testing, we found that third-party credibility indicators and security seals can reduce anxiety in the customer, like Tina talked about. Everyone is worried about privacy now. The Wall Street Journal, a very conservative newspaper, the newspaper of record, for a year and a half has been reporting on all these privacy concerns from the audience. So I want to ask you, Tina, have you found any successful practices of how to use privacy seals on pages such as these?
Yeah, good point. And I'd like to go back to the original goal of this test, which was to get the highest addressable lead rate. And so one of the things that creates leads that perhaps are not addressable or are not complete is a reticence to give personal information, because you really don't know what's going to happen to it. Am I going to end up on a mailing list? Is somebody going to sell my information somewhere else, so on and so forth? So by being able to provide indicators of high levels of privacy practices, we found that that has made a huge difference in the number of addressable leads that people are able to garner from their landing pages. So for instance, of the tests that we've done, we've seen around, I'd say, 19.4% increase in conversions. And that's average that we've taken. We took up the top outliers, which were as high as 84% increase, and then the very low, and averaged the middle, and that's where we came up with that number. So consistently we see 30% increase, 26% increase, 13% increase, those kinds of increases. And if you think about how that might impact your bottom line, it really is quite significant.
That's an excellent point, Tina. So let's take a look at this page for a second and think about what Tina's talking about. Okay? When we look at conversion, we think about what's going on in the mind of the user. So put yourself in the mind of a visitor to this page for a moment and decide if you would give your information. Okay? Now, look, it's free access. We're not even asking for any money, but there is a cost. We're asking for their information. And as Tina said, and as we all know, people are guarded with their information, right? So I want you to think of this as almost like a seesaw. And there's on one side of the seesaw, there's value. There's what the possible user could get from this. And on the other side of the seesaw, it's the negative things, the negative possibilities that might happen, right? And so what we want to do is shift that seesaw so it shifts to the value side so they see more value than possible negative factors from filling out this form, right? So we did some positive things like continue to free access now. We made that button very clear that they get free access. On the right with that Post-it note, we were very clear about what they get with the free access to show them more value. But we also wanted to reduce some of those negative things. And as Tina said, that's one way the TRUSTe seal can help on the bottom is they see less of a downside to clicking through your forms. With that, we got a question from Rebecca. Why did the loss happen? Rebecca, that is a prescient question, and that is the rest of our webinar. So let's jump ahead here. Let's talk about the way we test at MechLab. So first of all, let's think about why we test, okay? Now, I know you test to make more money, right? That's the end reason. But a lot of people, they just see all the impressive conversion gains their fellow marketers have gotten through optimization and testing, and so they throw some elements in and they say, I want to get a lift, and they keep doing it until they randomly get a lift. When we're testing, our goal is not to get a lift. We're trying to learn something. We're trying to gain business intelligence that we can then further leverage in our future marketing efforts, okay? So we got a question earlier from a token about site redesign. I hope you see where we're going with this now, about how you can use testing to help with your site redesign, not necessarily testing an entire new site. That would be an almost impossible task, but by learning from your customers through a testing optimization cycle. So there are two important elements that you need to actually learn from your customers. Okay? We're going to walk through those two now, and then we're going to go to another test later in the testing optimization cycle so you can see the overall effect of all these tests. We never run one or two tests and that's it, we're done, we've got a lift. It's always a testing optimization cycle. We're always continuing to learn and continuing to grow. So the first of those elements is a research question. You need a research question for your test. I'm just going to show you briefly. That is the first thing we fill out on the test protocol. The test protocol is a tool we use internally here in MechLabs. There's pages and pages to it. I can't teach you all about it today, but we can focus on the research question. And so when our research analysts are working on a test, the first thing they have to ask is that research question. Why are they even testing to begin with? So let's talk about what a research question is and what it isn't. The research question, the simplest way to put it is that it's a question of which. And it's a question that is focused on behavior that you can measure in a split fashion, right? That is, in the end, what we're doing with a test. That's why testing, split testing, is so powerful. We're actually measuring a behavior. We're seeing what the customers are actually doing. We're not asking them, hey, let's say, would you buy a product that doesn't exist with money you don't have? This is not a focus group. We're actually observing what they're doing. And so it's a question of which that focuses on a behavior. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. Again, please ask all the questions you can. We'll answer as many as we can if we're not clear with any of this. But we have some examples to make this a little clearer for you, right? So you don't want to ask, what is the best price for product X? Okay? Realistically, if you were testing in a scientific fashion, if you want to know the best price for product X, you would have to test infinity prices. you'd ask, which of these 3 price points produces the most revenue for product X?
Right.
So you see, not only are you saying specifically how many prices you're testing, you're also saying what is the goal of the test. How do you know if it's a successful test? What is the best price for product X? How could that ever be a successful test?
Right.
We will never know. We can test till we're old and gray. We will never know the best price. But if we say which of these specific 3 price points is going to drive the most revenue, in this case, not the most sales, our focus is revenue.
Right. And I think it's important to note here, Dan, that the research question, there are researchers that have conducted tests without a research question, but it was always implied. The research question is a formalization of the testing process. It's a formalization so that you don't get off track. It kind of controls the whole test and sets it up successfully so that you can then extract the learnings in a scientific way. So you now have like a firm foundation on which to stand, and you can now take away some learnings just because you formalize the process.
But the important thing is not just you. You are not the only one that has knowledge. If you are able to set up a culture of testing in your organization where you're continually testing and you're continually getting 500% lifts and you get 3 promotions, and now your direct report is looking at the test you ran a year ago, if he looks back and sees all the tests you ran and he sees what is the best price for product X, he has no idea what you've tested. If he sees which of these 3 price points produces the most revenue for product X, he knows exactly what the test means, exactly what the results mean, and so does everyone else in the organization, and you're beginning to seed business intelligence throughout the organization. Let's take another look. Example 2, why am I losing customers in the last step of my checkout process? I don't know, maybe you have a horrible product. There could be a million answers to that question. But this, eliminating which form element best reduces customer drop-off from the registration page to completed registration. Now, by doing that, we've already done a lot of the work of setting up the test to begin with. Why am I losing customers in the last step of my checkout process? That's something I think about when I wake up in the middle of the night. But by having that second question, it's a very focused which question, we already know what to test. So by putting in this little bit of work up front, you're going to get a lot more value from your test. So let's take a look at the 2 experiments that Paul just told you about. Let's take a look at, he told you about the research questions when he was going through. He was talking quickly. We don't have much time with you, so you probably didn't focus on every field he was talking about. But the primary research question for the first test was which page will achieve the greatest addressable lead rate. See how broad that is. We're going to get into this in a minute, why they were testing so broadly, but that was very broad. And so when they got that loss, they had to narrow it down. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I know we were kind of teasing a 24.5% drop. No one wants that. But if you want to get those big lifts, what you need to do is radical redesigns, also called multivariate testing. You're testing many different element changes on a page. If you want radical results, you need a radical redesign to your page. And so what they did is they looked at the pages, they formed a hypothesis, and they determined everything they wanted to learn on the page. And they tested. And by getting that loss, they realized they had to zoom in more and find out why they got that loss. So that second test, they zoomed in to learn a little more, and they asked which online capture process will generate the highest addressable lead rate. You see how they shifted there? Because that first test, one of the things they wanted to understand was what is the value to the customer. But instead of worrying about that value, they just wanted to focus on the process with the second test. And as Paul said, what they learned was they needed to focus that process more by taking off the pricing tab at the top. So they learned from that second test. Now, sometimes people struggle with this a little because multivariate testing can be intimidating. An A-B split test is really the only verifiable way to know which element made the difference, a one-factor A-B split test. But realistically, we don't have time to only run one-factor A-B split tests, right? Not only do we want to improve conversion quicker, but there's a limit to how much time we have to test, how many resources we have to put in it, how big our traffic is. So if we just tested tiny changes on our pages over and over, it would take years and years and years to see any results. So sometimes you have to start with those radical redesigns. You have to say, okay, if I could change everything on this page, what would I change? Let me put together some of these different tests. Let me see what the results are. And then when you get the results, you can start going down and down and down and saying, okay, let me focus a little more. On the first test, they tested the entire page. On the second one, they focused on the process. I hope everyone understands that. So we're going to move forward, but I've got a question here from Danny. He said he wanted to know the benefit of asking address, zip code, etc. on a form. How can I convince higher-ups asking for less fields will increase sales? And Tina, do you have some thoughts about that?
Sure. I mean, in terms of figuring out whether you should be including your address and zip code and whatnot on your form, really depends on your own business, how you use that information. Now, if you're generally marketing online, then no, you probably don't need those fields if you're not going to do anything with that information. And it sounds to me that's probably the direction that you're going in. But that said, there always is that challenge of how do you convince the higher-ups, perhaps those who are used to collecting that type of information, that it's really not that necessary. And I think really it just drives down to how many leads and how many sales you actually get from your form. And if you can show revenue impact of a shorter form, then I think that would be quite convincing. And in order to do that, I would expect doing a test where the research question is a longer form or a shorter form generating more leads and subsequently more revenue for this product would be the way to go.
That's an excellent point, Tina. It's great to pilot a test to learn, but I have one other piece of advice for you, Danny. If you just even need to get the approval to pilot that test, both MarketingSherpa.com and MarketingExperiments.com have hundreds of free case studies, and there are several case studies where we show how asking less information on a form improves overall results, you get more leads, you get more revenue. And I know a lot of marketers, when we go speak at different events around the country, they tell us that one of the real values they get out of both Marketing Sherpa and Marketing Experiments is getting those case studies and being able to show to their boss or whoever they need to convince what they'd like to do. And so that's another avenue you can look. And I have one more question. We have someone on the Twitter hashtag Sherpa webinar. They ask, what is relative difference? I'll explain that briefly. It's a good question. We're using that term a lot. For using any other terms you don't understand, please ask. Relative difference helps us understand the impact of a test, right? So, for example, if you went from 1 to 2, the difference is 1. That's the real difference. It doesn't really tell you the impact, though. If you went from 1 to 2, the relative difference is 100%. That's 100% growth. And so when we talk about relative difference, that's what we're talking about. So we just want to drive home the point of the research question. So how would you refine the following research question? Think about this for just a moment. What is the best headline for my landing page? How would you ask that as a which question that you can actually test using the behavior of your users? Which of these 2 landing page headlines will produce the highest conversion rate? Can you see the difference there? We have the goal there, the highest conversion rate. We talk specifically about 2 landing page headlines. Landing page is a pretty broad topic. All right, let's take a look at another one. How many objectives should I have on my homepage? This is a question we get asked a lot. This is a question we all want an answer to. How would you turn that into an actual research question you can test? Which set of offers on the homepage produces the highest click-through rate? Right. So at B2B Summit 2011 in San Francisco, I had the pleasure to interview on stage the owner of the IBM.com homepage, and they were working to optimize their homepage, and this is the exact question they asked. They tried different sets of offers, and they were focused on which one got the highest click-through rate. Okay, let's move on. The second key principle we want you to understand is not only do you need a research question, you need a theory question. You need a theory question. Let's talk briefly about what we mean by a theory question. So this is where we get into the broader question. Okay? When we talked about the research question, right, we said that you can't measure a generic objective. You have to measure a key action that you can attach a KPI to. That's what you're getting from your research question. From your theory question, you're asking that bigger question, why did this happen? And by asking that question, you're learning about your customer. This is what our researchers call customer theory. And by learning about the customer, this again goes back to the first question we had about site redesign. By learning about your customer, you're learning about how you can redesign either an individual landing page, how you can redesign an offer, how you can redesign an entire site. Okay. Now, a word of caution before we dive any deeper here. This chart is from our 2011 Landing Page Optimization Benchmark Report, the MarketingSherpa 2011 Landing Page Optimization Benchmark Report. What we're going to talk about next is how to take the data that you've collected through your testing and how to gain business intelligence from it and use that business intelligence. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase garbage in, garbage out. You need a valid test to make assumptions about your customers, and what we learned through the research, I believe surveyed 2,673 marketers, 40% of them don't calculate statistical significance. So let me just say, you can go to marketingexperiments.com if you're not familiar with statistical significance or validity. You can read a lot more about it. But I just want to describe it very briefly, and I want to make sure you're doing this, or I believe you're wasting all of your efforts, okay? Statistical significance, you can never be 100% sure of the answer with a test. But statistical significance lets you know how likely you can be that the results you're seeing actually represent the results in the real world. The problem is when we talk about numbers, people can sometimes gain a false confidence, right? As I said, the difference between 1 and 2 is a 100% relative difference. If you heard that I got a 100% growth in leads, you'd be pretty excited. If you heard it went from 1 to 2, you'd be less excited. The same is true with our tests. And the best analogy I can give you is if I just talk about my mom for one moment, and I hope you can follow me, or I hope this helps. So when I was growing up, my mom would always talk about me and my sister. We didn't have car seats, and we're still alive today. And so she doesn't understand all these safety functions we use with our kids, how we put them in car seats. What's the big deal, right? And on the face of that, it's a very hard argument to disagree with, right? Because she's observing something. It's true. There's nothing untrue about that statement. You know, when you were kids, you didn't have these fancy car seats, and you're still alive today. It's very true. But when I think about why then do we use car seats, right? Because we found over thousands and thousands and thousands of crashes and thousands and thousands and thousands of uses, that car seats have a higher likelihood of protecting children, right? And that is essentially what we're talking about when we talk about statistical significance, when we talk about validity. So sure, if you only have 2 samples, if you have 2 people come to your site and they convert, boy, you've got a 100% conversion rate, and you're just super excited, and you better make all those changes to every page. But what happens if the next 10 don't convert, and the next 10, and the next 10? By understanding validity and understanding statistical significance, you're understanding how likely it is that the sample you're seeing, because remember, you're never seeing the entire universe. You're never seeing the real world. You're only seeing a sliver of it. So you're understanding how likely that sliver you're seeing actually represents the real world. So I hope I didn't get too deep for you there, but this is a really important point. I want everyone to understand it because everything else we talk about is based on actual data. And if your data is faulty, then any assumptions you make from your data will be faulty as well. So let's move on and show you what we mean by a research question. So here's what you do. We talked about the research question. It's a question of which. Once you get an answer to that question, you can start understanding how the behavior reflects the identity of your customers. Next, you want to ask why. Why did that happen? And last, what? That's where we get to the theory question, okay? And in the back of your mind, the whole time you have to be thinking, to throw another question there for you of the value proposition question. If I'm your ideal customer, why should I buy from you rather than your competitors? This is what you have to answer with all of your pages, with everything you do, every click you ask for. And by understanding the customer better and by continually asking these questions and asking these questions and asking these questions and testing, you're learning more and more about your customers. Okay? So let's break this down. I want to try to make this as easy as possible. That first question, the which question, that's simply an observation, right? You're measuring behavior. Okay? So for example, you might be saying, which headline of these 4 headlines will produce more PPC clicks? That's our research question. You're measuring the behavior. You have an answer to that. The second question, that why question, that's where interpretation comes in. The which question, you're just getting raw data. Raw data is really useless. Unless you can make use of that data, it does nothing for you. It does not provide business intelligence. You need to be able to interpret that data and say, why did this behavior occur? So for example, that first question we had, which headline of these 4 headlines will produce more PPC clicks? Then we'd say, why did people who search for a specific keyword click on that headline more? So lastly, by going through this process for our tests, we get to the what question. Here you're gaining knowledge. You're saying, what do I know about my customer now? And hopefully by doing this, you're getting the full value out of your test. If you're testing, you're already taking the time to test. You're already taking the risk, the resources, and if you just simply think changing a button because it worked on one page is going to work on another, you're not getting the full value out of your test. But by understanding your ideal customer, by asking which, why, what you are. So to get that knowledge, now remember you're saying, let's go back to that example. Which headline, right, got more clicks? Why do people searching for that specific keyword click on that headline? Then you're just saying, what can I infer about my customers based on that answer? So now I'd like to go back to that first test that Paul showed, that 24.5% down test.
Yeah. So,
well, actually, let's just talk before we jump ahead to this is the final test. Paul's a little antsy today. He can't wait. He's drinking his coffee. He can't wait to give everything away. I want people to understand it first. That's fine, Paul. So he's got a third test he's excited to show. I'm not going to give it away, but it is another lift, so he's glad to show that. But no, that first test we showed you, there was a loss, and I remember Rebecca or someone asked before, why did we get that loss? Why did we lose? Well, we lost because, of course, we wanted to get a lift. We always want to get a lift, but more we wanted to learn something, right? And here's what we wanted to learn, and here's why that question was so broad. What our research team found was that going to that homepage, most of the people going to that homepage were coming from branded keywords, right? So either they were searching for Reg Online, or there was a PPC ad from Reg Online, or in some way they already knew about Reg Online. So what they were trying to learn then is what is the best thing to present to customers at that stage of their buying process, at that stage of their thought sequence where they are in the funnel. If they already know about Reg Online, do you have to give them the value of the product, or can you just give them the value of the offer? Can you jump ahead to that stage of the buying cycle and move them along? And so what they found was, no, that even though people were searching for Reg Online, even though they were clicking on ads for Reg Online, they only knew enough about Reg Online to get to that page. They didn't understand enough of the value of Reg Online to want to convert yet, to want to get to that offer.
That's right.
Right. So again, I was trying to sell a car to Paul earlier, and he was, it sounds like, willing to engage in some criminal activities just to get a Bentley for $50,000.
Totally, yeah.
But if I offered to sell him a Bentley for $50,000 before he knew what a Bentley was, I'm guessing he would think $50,000 is a lot of money if he had no idea what a Bentley or a Rolls Royce was, right?
Yeah, that is correct, Dan.
And by the way, after this call, I'm going to try to sell Paul my actual car and see how that went. And that is exactly what happened. So with Reg Online, they were trying to sell the customer the offer before they understood the value of what they were getting with that offer. So a free trial has zero value. But a free trial to a product that customers already understand and already see value in, that can drive people to convert. And so that's what they were trying to learn. And what they learned, frankly, was, hey, maybe we can't just jump to the offer. Even though they are searching for Reg Online, even though they're familiar with it, they're not familiar enough. And so that's why they went back and they said, all right, let's step back for a minute and let's test the process. So we're going to get into that test in just 1 minute. Paul's excited here, but I want to show you just 2 quick examples so you can understand how to ask this theory question. Let's jump ahead. So here's an example. Which headline will generate a higher response? A, save $100 on product X. B, produce X. Product X comes with a lifetime guarantee, right? We get the result. We ask why. Now that theory question, then we get to ask, what does my ideal customer prefer? If the save $1 headline wins, we can likely infer that they prefer cost savings. If the lifetime guarantee headline wins, then we might be able to infer that they prefer product quality. Now again, this is just one test I'm showing you, and I don't want you to get the impression that you can learn everything about your customer in just one test. I mean, next you would likely further test the winner, test different variations of the headlines. This should all be part of a testing and optimization process within your company so you continue to learn. But let's give you one more example and then turn over to Paul to tell you about the last experiment in this sequence he's so excited to tell you. So the research question, which call to action will generate a higher response? Get your product X now, learn more about product X. We ran that. We asked why. And then our theory question is, what is the incremental decision my customer is ready to make? Are they ready to buy, or are they just ready to learn more? This goes back exactly to that homepage test we showed you first. Now let's get back to that homepage test. What did they test next, Paul?
Right. So now that I've had to wait for so long to get to this homepage test again, so we're going back to the homepage. We learned all that stuff on our SEO landing page. and now we wanted to test it back on the homepage. We figured there was less risk now that we knew a little bit more. We had a more solid customer theory. So this is the same homepage. The primary research question is which lead capture process will generate the highest addressable lead rate, and here's the control again. It's the same control, still not a lot of guidance there in the thought sequence, and here's our treatment. It's important to note that we weren't positive that the three-step process wasn't the culprit for the negative lift, is what we call it. So we kept it at a two-step process, but we eliminated that navigation on the homepage, and then we also pumped up the value a little bit to focus more on the product rather than the actual process of getting free access. So here they are side by side. Again, you can observe the differences, and here's the results. We got a 90% increase in conversion. And then after further testing, we were finally able to increase the conversion on the homepage by 141%. So it's pretty exciting time. But I'm just going to break down kind of how that looked at a higher level. So here's our original test where we got our negative 24%. And like Dan was saying earlier, we had to ask why. Why did that happen? And when we asked why, we determined that it could be because of the value was wrong and we weren't guiding the thought sequence correctly. So that gave us a what about our customer, and we tested that what on our SEO landing page, and we got our lift. So once we got our lift, we had to ask why again. We had to ask why, and we determined that we were probably right. It was probably because of the incorrect focus on the wrong value in that guidance of thought sequence. And so we went back to the home page and tested it, and we got our lift again. And when we asked why, our suspicions were confirmed, and so we went back to that three-step process, and we got a 27% lift again. And overall, we eventually got a 141% cumulative lift.
Yeah, in just a moment, we're going to jump in and show you some examples. We had some examples submitted and give you some ideas of what to test. But I just want to show you one more. We have, if you go to marketingexperiments.com, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of case studies. But I just want to show you that I don't want to scare anyone.
We don't have hundreds of thousands of case studies.
Yeah, there was an or there. I'm sorry. Hundreds or thousands. Paul's a fact checker, hundreds. But I just want to show you, we don't want to scare you with that down test. You don't need to necessarily lose in the first test to learn something. I just want to show you very briefly another example of how we applied the theory question. You can see there's a win there, a 201% win. And then we kept learning and we kept testing through the process. A 2% win, a 29% win. And then eventually what we did, we're able to take these learnings and use them to optimize PPC campaigns and optimize other pages. And so again, when we get back to that question that was first asked, is there just a way to test an entire site redesign? What you want to do first is understand your customer. And you want to test big changes and you want to drill down from there. I hope everyone understands those points. Again, if you'd like to ask some more questions, please do. But I want to sum it up, then we're going to get into some real examples. Again, test to learn something. You cannot assume you're going to get a lift on every test. If you do, that's fantastic. But at least if you go into a test trying to learn something, you will get value out of that test. And to achieve the maximum amount of learnings, you need to ask a research question. You need to ask a theory question. You just cannot randomly test. So I want to tell you about a few of our offerings for just a minute or two, but then we have a pretty interesting testing strategy session where you, the audience, submitted your pages. You wanted some ideas of what to test. Tina, Paul, and I, we're going to go right up to 2 o'clock. We're going to tell you as many ideas we have for your pages as possible. So hopefully this will help not just the people who submitted pages, but also if you're on the line, if you have a similar page, and if you have similar questions about what you should be testing and what you should be asking about your own sites. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But what we talked about today, there was a few complex things. I just want to let you know we have a Fundamentals of Online Testing course. It's about an 8-hour course. It goes through all the basics you need to know for testing, such as validity and such as asking a research question. John and Justin here, boy, they're generous guys, these marketing guys. They're letting you save $100. You can see the information there. If you don't get that information, you can email me, editor@MarketingSherpa.com, editor@MarketingSherpa.com, and I'll make sure you get that information. And Tina, I believe you wanted to tell the audience about something as well.
Yep, and we are also running an offer till the end of the year for up to 50% off of a TRUSTe privacy seal. Now there's a couple of different packages that you can leverage in order to get that seal. All of it is explained on that URL listed there. So feel free to go check it out and see which one might work for you.
All right, thanks, Tina. And if that URL looks too long for you, you can just email me, editor@MarketingSherpa.com. I'll make sure you get that URL and you save some money before the end of the year. And one last thing, when we close out, we've got about another 10 minutes. When we close out this webinar, there's going to be a survey there. Filling out this survey helps us perform better, helps us do better webinars, helps us optimize everything we're doing. So please fill out that survey. In it, you can also ask for more information about things like our online courses, our on-site training, our handbooks, our benchmark reports, and if your company would like to become a research partner and work with those horrible, horrible research analysts we have that lose 24.5% on homepage tests. I'm sure you could sell that to your boss. All right, let's get into our testing strategy session. So the first one up, this is, I pronounce it wrong every time I say it, Paul. How do you pronounce it?
Well, you raised some doubt in my mind, but I say TiVo, but I don't know. I mean, that's the only way I've heard it.
You say TiVo, I say TiVo. TiVo makes sense. It's about TV. Let me tell you something.
I'm playing on TiVo.
TiVo, okay, I'm outvoted. I mispronounce everything. But let me give you some background about this page, and then we're going to ask for some advice from Paul and Tina. So the audience is 100-plus household income, 20 to 50 in age, 60% male, 40% female. The objective is DVR sales. And the incoming channels are display, paid search, organic search, and email. So, Paul, do you want to give your thoughts first on this one?
Yeah, this is a page that I would want to start over on. I don't know how many people are clicking to hear TiVo sing that North Pole, I guess you could call it. The link, those are links on there, and the links don't really tell me anything about the product or about what I'm getting, even when I click on the links. The headline is "More Joy to Your World." That doesn't make much sense to me. There's no value there. I would want to test a page. I would want to learn where my customers are in the thought sequence. Have they heard of TiVo? Or are they brand new to the product? Are they coming from a PPC ad? I would test a few different treatments. One would be an introduction to TiVo. Another might be, I already know about TiVo. This is the difference between TiVo and, say, DirecTV or Dish Network. But that's kind of where I would start. I don't know. You have any more comments, Dan?
Yeah, I think, Tina, we were talking earlier about, I see there's a email capture form in the bottom right.
Yes. So it looks like there is, a way for people to sign up right away. I think perhaps a couple of things that come to mind is, one, why would they want to sign up? Is there a way to figure out which value proposition or which offer that would cause them to sign up for this, to give people their email, and then also remove, again, some of those barriers to actually wanting to share personal information, whether there's anything that can be done to release some of that friction.
Excellent. Paul. Thank you, Tina. And Paul, I'm like you. I kind of worry, too, would a product comparison work better? I mean, if you tested that against this, and by testing a product comparison, possibly you can learn where in the buying cycle the customer is. So when they get to the TiVo page, are they thinking, should I get TiVo instead of, I guess, what my cable company is offering? Or are they thinking, I don't know what they're thinking by More Joy to Your World. But keep in mind, this is a homepage. This is something we were talking about earlier, too. But this is a one-product homepage, essentially. As far as I can tell, TiVo only sells TiVo. So you should think of this homepage as a landing page, right? As someone getting here, where are they in the thought process? Are they ready to buy? Do they want to compare products? Or do they just need some information? And you should go from there. And so the next page I want to show, I think, is a good example of a company that put together a landing page for customers that are probably midway through the buying cycle. They know about the product category, but they're at the point where they're deciding which product to go with. So let me give you some background about this page. It is a B2B audience. The objective is to get visitors to download a free trial. And the channel is organic and paid search, Microsoft Visio keywords. So they're performing a little keyword jujitsu there because, just to be clear, this is not Visio. This is what they call a Visio alternative. The company is called SmartDraw. Well, you can't see the bottom of the page. All you really have, they have a call to action link, and all they really have is some social media sharing buttons. So,
well, here's the bottom of the page right here.
Good.
So here's the bottom, and there's a link, call to action, and then some social media sharing buttons.
So, Tina, what do you think they can learn on this page?
Yeah, so I have to admit, I took a look at this page, and I actually cheated, and I clicked through to the trial page. And I noticed that on that page they do have a trust mark, a VeriSign trust mark that they listed on that page. And I would be curious to find out, clearly they see the value in listing that, whether bringing it up to this top level page, whether that would increase the likelihood of clicking through. And then subsequently I would be curious as to whether, testing that mark against other marks, whether they would be able to increase conversions that way as well.
Great. Excellent. So something that I'm interested in is, so if we go back to this page, they're clearly showing, it's a product comparison page. So I think that's helpful. They're showing how their product compares to Visio, which I'm guessing is a more known product. But the challenge is when I read through it, they don't, and I hope I'm not being too harsh on them. Part of offering these optimization suggestions, let me first say, is we're very thankful to everyone who sent their pages in to allow us to butcher them. But the only way we can help improve them is by sometimes offering what seems like negative feedback. But in these suggestions they offer between Visio and Microsoft, they don't say anything good about Visio. And certainly as bad as they think Visio is, there must be something good about it. And the problem is, so when visitors go to this site, yes, it might be helpful. They're seeing this comparison. But how much do they really trust SmartDraw, right? So our managing director, Flip McLaughlin, loves to say, tell me what you can't do, and then tell me what you can, and I might believe you. And that's the truth here. I even recently saw an interview with Dick Cheney where they asked him, what has Barack Obama done right? And he answered the question. Barack Obama has done these things right. I might disagree with him on most things, but he's done these things right. And if Dick Cheney can say Barack Obama has done something right in the war of terrorism, I think SmartDraw can say that Microsoft Visio is doing something right as well. And by doing so, you'll have, I think, get a little more credit with your customers. I'm going to move on to the next page. We have time for maybe one or two more. But first, there's a quick question I want to answer. And Paul and Tina, you can think about your suggestions for this page. But they say, how can you sell the need for testing to a department resistant for change? So I think this kind of gets back to the answer that Tina and I gave before. I partly think it's a two-step process. So, I'm pretty partial to, there's a lot of good information on MarketingSherpa.com and MarketingExperiments.com about customers who've gotten big wins off of testing. I'm sure there are other sites out there where you can find similar case studies or find them from your peers. Using that in combination with some of our benchmark report data can show your company that there is possibilities to get big wins from testing. Another key point to make is testing is really helpful to you, the marketer, right? So you got to ask, who does the CEO, who your business leaders turn to ask about the customer, right? As a marketer, you want to be able to own the customer. Do they turn to sales or do they turn to you? And the problem with turning to sales, you have to tell the CEO, is sales is they might be dealing with the customer more than you, but they're not getting honest answers. No one honestly tells sales why they didn't buy, right? They're not going to say, you have a horrible product, you're a horrible person. And so by testing, you're really learning about the customer. And then second, as Tina said, I wouldn't try to sell them on a huge budget and on testing everything. I would only sell them on the idea that you're going to test a small pilot. Let's get started, let's see what works, and then you get those wins in that small pilot, you can sell them more. Okay, we got about 1 minute left. Paul, why don't you give us some suggestions for this page?
Sure. So this is Sure. First thing I would test on this page is just a better layout. There's no value as far as I can see right up front. There's some buried in the individual products, but that headline doesn't tell me anything about Sure. if I wasn't familiar with their products, I would have no idea what this page was about. It doesn't tell me what can I do, and well, it doesn't tell me where am I, what can I do here, and why should I do it. And those are the three kind of key questions you want to answer. So I would just test a treatment that cleaned up the I path. There's 3 evenly weighted columns there. That's usually never good for conversion. Guide their thought sequence, throw up a treatment, and see how it does.
Okay, let me say very briefly, what I would want to learn is where the customers are in the buying process when they get here. I see, sure, I've vaguely heard of it. Maybe if I'm in the industry, I'd know. But this is the homepage. The homepage we saw before, the TiVo homepage, we said could be a landing page, right? This is the homepage where they have multiple products. The goal of the homepage is not to be a landing page. It is to quickly get customers to where they want to go. And by clearly showing them the different paths of where they can go, as to having this beautiful branded shot of some band I've never heard of, which I'm sure is great, then you can find out what your customers want and what they're interested in. We're almost out of time, but let me show you one last example of what I think is a good homepage. It's a very still homepage, but you can clearly see this homepage is directing people to where they want to go. It's for Toyota's Canadian homepage, their Canadian branch, and as you know, in Canada, you need to have both English and French, so they need this interstitial page, but they're using it very well. You either want the English or the French. I might make the buttons a bit bigger to make it clear. Anyway, we're all out of time. Thank you very much for joining us, and please fill out the survey.